On this episode, I bring back a guest who we've had on the podcast before. Her name is Julie Solomon, and she's the host of the Influencer Podcast. Now, she has built multiple businesses online, and she has built a massive brand with her podcast and her Instagram following. Now, she has written a book breaking down all the things that she's had to learn and the things that she teaches her students in order to help them find their purpose, more confidence, and become more successful. And in today's episode, we're diving into all of that. So keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today I have an amazing episode because we have an amazing guest. This is a returning guest. In the first episode that we had, we talked about so many amazing things. And today's guest is Julie Solomon, and we're having her come back. And we're actually going to be talking about something a little bit different and something that I'm really passionate about and something that I know our audience is going to absolutely love. So Julie, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you back.
Thank you, Brandon, so much for having me. I so appreciate this and this fun conversation.
Yeah, of course. So you have a new book coming out, and I was just reading the back cover of it, and I was reading a lot of the reviews, and you have some amazing reviews. And I want to talk about some of the lessons from your book. So before we dive into those, can you just give us a little bit of an overview of what's the title of your book and what is it about and who is it for?
Yes. So the book is called Get What You Want: How to Go From Unseen to Unstoppable. It is a very action-packed title. Pretty much this is about getting what you want. And the reason why I wanted to write this book is because for a very long time, I didn't think that I could get what I wanted, because I didn't think that getting what I wanted was possible. And going through and now being able to be in this online space, I help people build personal brands and really unlock their superpower, which is influence. Even if you don't believe that, that is your superpower, and I help you bring that to life. I would work with a lot of women, predominantly women and some men, and it was this idea of, I can't get what I want because I don't know what I want, or I can't get what I want because getting what I want is impossible. Like, it's too late, I've passed my time, what have you. And so I knew that this was, this story that not only I had told myself for a very long time, this limiting belief, but it was also something that a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs were telling themselves. And I think that it's so easy to kind of be on the outside looking in, especially when you're starting out or when you're in a growth or scaling phase, to be like, okay, now I'm ready for that next level, but it's not happening fast enough, or I can't figure it out, or I don't know what's going on, or why am I so stuck? And so we really start to lay down the principles as to why a lot of this can happen. And for me, a lot of it stemmed around money. I had major money mindset blocks and issues stemming from my childhood. In the book, I call them your origin stories. It's kind of like a take on, the DC and Marvel comic book worlds. Every superhero has an origin story, and I think every person has one. And these are really the stories that shape and make up how we show up in the world, how we see the world, and how we communicate with the world around us. And mine with money was one of a lot of scarcity. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I come from very humble beginnings. My parents didn't go to college. My dad literally wore a blue collar to work every day. He worked in the auto plant, just very kind of your working class family. And so I always had this lack mindset that there wasn't enough money, there's never enough money, and that success had to be hard and everything had to be a challenge. So that really compounded a lot of these fears around money. And when I got older and I was able to make money, I never learned how to manage money, nor did I ever feel that I was worthy or responsible enough to manage the money in the first place. So I started spending it faster than I could make it. And this was almost a decade ago by this point. But at this time, I was still doing PR. And on the outside looking in, it looked like, I had this cushiony PR job. I was working with all these clients. But I had slowly started to amass over $30,000 of credit card debt. And I hid it from my husband. And he found out one day, and as you can imagine, he was not too happy about that. We were refinancing our home, and the mortgage lender said, hey, you guys are good to go, but you have this credit card. And my husband's like, no, I don't have debt. That was a big thing for my husband of like,
Right.
was reeled into him as a child of like, do not put yourself in debt. If you have a credit card, you pay that off every month.
Right.
And my husband's like, I haven't been in debt ever. Like, what are you talking about? And he was like, oh no, you've got a $30,000 credit card here.
Oh my gosh.
And my husband called and he was like, when were you going to tell me about the credit card? And it was like a rock bottom moment, right? Like my throat sunk to my stomach. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm being found out. How do I fix this? How do I fix this? And the whole time that he was talking, it's just like, I couldn't even hear anything. Just this question came up in my mind. And it was, why am I so afraid to be honest about money? Why am I so afraid of money?
Right.
Why am I so afraid to be honest about my understanding or my relationship or my fear around money? And so that moment really kind of kicked off this precipice. Obviously I felt horrible because I had lied to, the most important person in my life, my husband. He had found out. He was having his own, issues with this and, thinking he's like, I don't know if this is an isolated incident or if you're like a spender-aholic and need to go figure it out, but like, this is not okay. And so there was a lot of layers of having to figure this out. But what it did is that it allowed me to hit a rock bottom so I could kind of rise out of the ashes and have a new growth period, which actually did set off the business that I now have. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but it took a lot of work. I went into therapy for the first time. I started to read a lot of books. I brought in a financial, manager and consultant that could start to really help me understand, what are your strengths around money? What are your challenges around money? Let's talk about budgeting money. Let's like really start to work on your mindset around that and not always just wanting to put your head in the sand. And so when I started to really peel back the layers of my psychology around it, then I was able to kind of become more aware, accept where I had gotten myself. I had put myself into this and now I'm gonna have to get myself out of it. And then from there, I was able to take action and to start restoring a lot of the things that were lost because I had done that for so long, which is of course, self-confidence and worthiness and self-esteem and all of those things. So that's really where I kind of kick off the book and start to then, ask the reader, yes, you may not be hiding $30,000 of credit card debt from your husband, but, maybe it's something else related to, your ability to succeed or your ability to share your message with the world or what you think is your capacity for success that's actually hindering you. And are you sabotaging yourself in the process?
Yeah. Okay. So much to unpack there. And I love the way you laid that out because I know in the audience, like there's so many different things you just covered that they can relate to. The credit card debt actually is almost identical to what I went through when back in 2017, I racked up about $30,000 and about $10,000 in taxes. And I hid it from my wife and she didn't know until I actually paid it off. And then I went and told her, but that's right when our business really started to take off. And so I can totally relate to that. And when you talk about like the origin story, because it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, the origin story or these experiences that we have when we're younger kind of form, is it our subconscious? Is that kind of what we're talking about? These like subconscious beliefs or these like structures and where we operate from. And then they basically control our actions and how we think as adults. That dictates our success and how we operate in the world. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's how I experience it.
Okay. So if someone can relate to part of your story or they know they have something going on or they're like at a block or a plateau, what's the first step? Is it just like awareness, like becoming aware and acknowledging that there's something going on? I mean, what is it? What's that pathway look like?
Yeah. So there's actually 3 of them that all start with A that
Cool.
I actually learned. They're very well known in recovery circles and therapy circles. The first one is awareness. And I adapted these and shared them in the book. And I can kind of explain how I take it. The first one, awareness, is really, it's that identification that there's a problem or dysfunction that exists that needs to change. The second one is acceptance, which is the one that no one ever wants to do because it's the most uncomfortable place where we have to come to grips with where we got ourselves and our part to play in it. So it's like, this problem isn't all of me, but it's definitely a part of me. It's a piece to the puzzle that no longer fits, and it needs to be removed, and it has to be removed by me. And I have to start accepting where I'm at and accepting myself and really other people and places and things as they are, and nothing more or nothing less.
Well, it sounds like
And
responsibility too, right? Just taking
oh,
responsibility for what you've created.
totally. I mean, that's everything. And it's so much easier to stay in the, oh, woe is me, the poor me's, the solution
Victimhood,
is
yeah.
out there. Therefore, I don't have to take accountability for it. So it's that victimhood, that perpetual state of helplessness that sometimes we like to stay in, even if we say we don't want to be there, because the payoff is that we stay small, we stay comfortable, so we think, and we don't have to be responsible for, the life that we've created. And not that everything that happens to us is our responsibility. Absolutely not, because we can't control external people or situations, but the way in which we respond to them is. And it's like, whether I realized it or not, I'm not a toddler. I was making a choice to hide that from my husband. And I had reasons to justify, and, I didn't want to hear it from him. I would just fix it. I'll pay it off. He doesn't need to worry about, whatever I was justifying and rationalizing in my head to make it okay was what I was doing. But it wasn't until I was able to really accept, this characteristic of me wanting to do those things, it no longer fits. It's not getting me to where I want to go. So it needs to be removed.
Right.
And then the third A is action. And that's, that's the plan that we can put in place to really start to take the next steps about, okay, now I'm here. What am I going to do about it? And then we can start to restore a lot of the things that have been lost because of the dysfunction that took place. So then that's where self-esteem comes in, and confidence and balance and success and growth and abundance and all of those things.
Okay, gotcha. So when we look at that first A, awareness, what does that process even look like? Like if someone, let's just say that someone's listening right now and they're like, okay, I know something is wrong, but they can't really put their finger on it. What can they start looking at or doing to just become aware of the root issue? Or is it not as simple as that? Does it take like therapy? Does it take self-discovery? Like what is that? Look, because I know with like subconscious things, the thing is it's so tricky about them. So you have no idea that they're even there or running.
Right. Yeah. I think it does depend on how deep the denial is, to be honest. For some people, they can see awareness is just the reality of the being aware of the reality of the situation. And just, it's basically fact finding.
Yeah.
It's like really clearing out the clutter and like, these are the facts. And so I think that, if you're like really deep in it and like you can't see, then it may take more recovery, more therapy, more work. If you're not so deep in it, then you may be able to quickly be aware of what's happening. And that was the thing. Like I was clearly conscious that I was actively participating and not telling my husband this information.
Yeah, totally.
But what I wasn't conscious of was like that why am I so afraid to just be honest with him about this? Like, why am I going to get in trouble? And like, why do I think that as a grown adult, I'm going to get in trouble? So it was more about the awareness of what are the things happening behind the scenes that that I choose to, make a decision from.
Right.
And so that's where the origin story comes into play. So that's why I feel like you don't want to like stay in the origin story, but you do need to go back to really understand the origin story, because that's what helps you unlock the awareness.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of like that root cause. And so what it sounds like is almost like identifying these actions that you're aware of. Like you were very aware of, you were hiding the debt from your husband, but then it's going one step further, getting yourself out of victimhood. Because if you're in victimhood, you can't change anything, because when you're in a victim, you're basically saying the external world controls me and it's not my fault. And you can't change anything when you're in that state. So if we can look at the actions, ask why, or get curious into why am I doing this, we can start to get to that root cause.
Yeah.
And it sounds like once we start to do that, we can go through the acceptance and start putting into action. And when people go through these three things, which I know you cover in your book, what do they start to experience in their life? Like how does these three steps manifest in your life to be able to get what you want?
They start to experience freedom, which is pretty freaking phenomenal, because when you can really start, because what awareness and acceptance and action does is that it thaws you out. And once you're less frozen, you can start to think and feel in a different way, which means you're starting to show up in a different way. You're starting to advocate for yourself in a different way. You're starting to create healthier boundaries. You're starting to really articulate, what it is that you want, what it is that you don't want, what you stand for, what you don't stand for, who you serve, and how you do that. And you're really able to show up in a way that gives you the freedom to unlock the limitless potential that then gets you what you want. So to me, they're really my 3 tools to freedom.
Okay, gotcha. And who do you see is the person? Well, I mean, is there like common origin stories that you see like over and over again? And what would those be?
Yeah, I think the most common ones are, scarcity is a big one for people. People pleasing
Okay.
is a big one. Control.
What do you mean by control? Like being controlled, or you're trying to control?
Trying to control.
Got it.
And
Okay.
trying to manipulate and shape because we feel like we're safe when we do that. So, a big thing that kind of comes up with control, and I say this in the book, is that if you offer help more than once, you're trying to control.
Oh, interesting.
And so, especially as coaches, like we have these really good ideas
Yeah.
about how everybody else should be living their life and doing their business, and to an extent, it's true. I mean, we're literally hired to consult and support and hold a container for people to grow their business.
Right.
But there's a fine line between being a support system and kind of coming in and doing for someone else what they should be doing for themselves, and it can cause this really imbalanced codependency and enabling, because if I'm always jumping in to fix someone else's problem, or if I think that my ideas are the best and I'm jumping in to give them ideas before they've even asked me for ideas, I'm stealing from them the dignity for them to have their own experience.
Right.
And so I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that makes a lot of sense. And I see this with a lot of, because obviously we're in the same space. So we work with a lot of coaches as well. And one of the biggest issues that a lot of them have is that they will say things like, well, my students aren't getting the results that I want, or I feel bad if someone pays me money and then doesn't get some kind of transformation. And when I come back, and I don't understand how to communicate this more to people, because I guess it's just something that I understand, is that it's not your job to make sure that they have the transformation. It's their job to do it. And after talking with you, what I'm recognizing is having like the need and the desire for someone to have a specific transformation when coming through your program is a mechanism of control.
Totally.
And I never saw that before until right now.
Yeah.
So how do we start to let go of that? I mean, as coaches.
Yeah. I mean, we do not assume the responsibility for other people's success and happiness, period. And I think most importantly, as coaches, it is our job to express my own success and happiness in a way that if you turn into it and can be in the energy of it, then you can start to experience not only the benefit of your own success and happiness from you experiencing mine.
Right.
And so when we become dependent on what others are doing and how others are feeling, and most of all, how others think and feel about us, which puts us in a very powerless and hopeless position, because we're now dependent upon what someone else is doing or what someone else is thinking, with their focus over what we have no control over anyways. So when you start looking for those who quote unquote need you, you're always moving into that controlling state of needing you.
Yeah.
Because you really can't give your energy to someone else. You can only demonstrate your alignment to someone else. You can only be that mirror.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. This is so good. And so, the more we dive into this, the more I'm even starting to realize, because I'm taking everything you're saying and I'm applying it to like my own life. Like, how does this apply to me? I think that's what everyone's going to be doing. Yeah. So when I'm going to go back to that like coaching scenario, is that when someone is like, I need to give them a transformation, it's a form of control, which actually stems from this desire to want to be not called out, to be accepted, to want
feel powerful.
Yeah. Which again could stem, if I'm understanding correctly, back to an origin story. There must have been some experience in their past where that desire for that control or acceptance was
created, correct?
Exactly. So
Okay.
it's like, something along the way told you that in order for you to feel safe or seen or heard or powerful, you have to control every situation and every person, place, and thing. And not only do you have to control it, but you're actually really, really good at it. So the more that you can shape and manage and fix and do for others, the more safety you have, the more power you have, the more control you have over everything that happens in your life, which is such a delusional way of thinking because like we're not that powerful.
Right.
Like, we're human beings. Like we're just not that powerful.
Yeah.
And so, I always thought about it as like a ladder to give people visuals when I first started coaching. It was like my students had a ladder and then I had a ladder, but I didn't realize that I had a ladder. And so I kept going up their ladder and I was behind them. And every single time they would fall, I would cushion the blow. And then I would be like, okay, let's get back up. I know we can get back to the top of the ladder. We'd keep going up and then would fall, cushion the blow. Well, what kept happening is that I kept getting hurt. I kept cushioning the blow. They just kept going up and falling and up and falling and up and falling. They weren't learning anything. They weren't changing. They weren't growing. They were just staying on the same perpetual path because I was enabling that type of environment and that type of behavior. But when I was able to step back and become aware of that dysfunction, I then was able to kind of pivot and be like, oh, there's a ladder right here that actually has my name on it. So I'm going to go climb that. And I'll encourage you and I'll support you along the path. But if you fall off your ladder, like that doesn't have my name on it anymore.
Right.
And it's not my responsibility to get you up. It is my responsibility to hold space, to reflect back to you what it is that you want in yourself, to pose questions, to even maybe consult. And maybe sometimes I'll have answers, but it's not my responsibility to make sure that you get out of life what it is that you want because I'm not you.
Right. I think that's really important too. And I think as coaches, being careful of giving advice is really important because you can't see people's stuff. You can't see their origin story. You can't see their karma. You can't see the things they're dealing with. And it's like, unless you can see everything, how on earth are you supposed to give advice to that specific person? Because the only thing you can do is give advice from your perspective and your experience, which isn't theirs. And so sometimes the advice might not be best from them. Right. So I love that analogy of like the ladders, because it's like, yeah, I'm going to support you. I'm going to encourage you. I might even show you how I'm doing it. Like, well, here's me climbing up the ladder, but you're going to have to do it. Which I think is really important because I have a couple questions about kids and all this stuff. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, origin stories start when we're kids. And when I became aware of a lot of this stuff going on, I was always it used to be like afraid, like, oh man, I'm going to screw my kid up in an origin story that's going to like send them down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And what I've come to terms with is that I can't, again, that's a form of control. I can't control that. I can just show up as the best I can, and whatever origin story they get is their lesson to learn. I mean, what's your advice to that? If anyone's kind of like, well, how do I create origin stories for my kids or control that? Is that just another form of an origin story that's, like disrupting your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think it can be. I think with small children, it's, kind of two of my biggest coaching hacks for myself is that I do not do for others what they can do for themselves. And I wait for the question mark. Yeah. If there's not a question, I do not need to respond with an answer because there's no question.
Right.
With kids, I may have to respond with an answer if there's not a question. And I may have to do for them what they can't do for themselves because they're small. So I think that it depends on as they're growing, and there's always going to be those moments, those teachable moments of, where's that balance between me giving them the dignity to experience this, even if it's really crappy. Like, for example, my son, he's 9 years old. He just tried out for the baseball all-star team, didn't make it. He was fine with it. Husband, not so much. Husband took it like real personally, and so it was like, okay, so, and he started kind of putting his own stuff, like then my husband's origin story of not being picked for the baseball team when he was 12 years old started rearing its ugly head. Right. And I just said, okay, so we have to first identify, like, why are you taking this so personal? And how do we use this as a great teaching moment with our son to say, look, if you're ready to get serious about baseball and you want to go all in, we're here to support you, but you have to start taking it a little bit more seriously in your attitude. You can't just get striked out and then come crying in the dugout. Like
Right.
your attitude's going to have to start shifting. You're not 4 years old anymore. You're now 9. And so it's I think finding those moments that can happen with children, but I also think as coaches, because I've been there too, even though we're adults, we can also be kind of like adult children at times. And there may be times that, you're coaching an adult, but they're coming in with a very childlike or childish mindset about something. And it's going to be your job as the coach to figure out what is this fine line between me supporting and showing up for this person versus maybe giving them the dignity to kind of have a rock bottom and kind of not make the all-star team and like see what they learn from it.
Yeah. And that's so hard to do. I mean, especially with your kids, because I look back in my life and I'm like, okay, cool. The most pivotal moments in my life were bottom moments. Those are the greatest lessons, the greatest amount of awareness, the greatest change, the greatest whatever. And, we were talking before the podcast of like the last year, and we were talking about like, man, it's been like just crazy. And it's, for me personally, it's just been emotionally hard. And there's been a lot of physical like things going on and just stuff with the business. And I've gone through enough of these to recognize like, okay, this is, in 2 years, this is going to be so amazing. But right now it just really sucks. But I'm so grateful going through it, because now as a parent, I'm able to do that a lot better. Like look at what my kid is going through and just let it happen and just be that support without trying to fix it. And just let them learn that lesson. And my God, it is one of the hardest things, because as a parent, all you want to do is help.
I know you do. And that's where also too, like we can have the discernment, like we have that gut check for a reason. If there's something that is not okay, that is crossing a boundary, that is a non-negotiable for us, that's when we can say, okay, no more. This is not like unsubscribe, opt out. Like we are not actively participating in this. Right.
Yeah.
But then there could be those other experiences that it's like, am I enabling, or am I not enabling? Like, am I helping or am I enabling? Am I supporting or am I trying to fix or trying to control? And so that's even with my 9-year-old, I'll have to remind myself, like, wait for the question mark, like, see if he can come up with a solution. Cause maybe, and that's the thing that it's like, I have to remember even as a parent and as a coach, like, I do not know what's best, even if I really think that I do. Like, even if I know, because I know, I don't always know what's best. He may come up with some clever, amazing 9-year-old magical idea that I would have never thought of. But if I'm just jumping in to fix something that's maybe not even broken to begin with, I'm not giving him the dignity of exploring and finding that creative answer for himself.
Yeah. And you're, like you said earlier, robbing him of that opportunity and that experience. So I love the whole thing with like, wait for the question mark. I think one of the biggest lessons, and again, it's all about awareness. I just wasn't aware of this, but it feels so stupid now that I'm aware of this thing. But for the longest time, I didn't realize there was a major communication problem with my wife and I. And we've been together since we were 16 and 15 years old. We've been together for over 20 years without any interruption. And so we've had a great relationship. This last year has been really tough. And one of the biggest things for us was our communication. And I realized I was coming in and trying to fix everything. And so she would come in with like telling me, here's what happened today, or here's what I'm dealing with, or here's a problem I have. And then I would come in with a solution and an answer, because I think as entrepreneurs, that's kind of what our program is like. Let's solve problems. Let's get it fixed. Let's move on.
Right.
And I wasn't listening. And that whole, just that advice you give, just wait for the question mark. And I'm looking back at a lot of our conversations and I'm like, man, she never gave me a question mark. And then I was answering it. She wasn't even asking me anything. It's like, God, it caused so much disruption. And it's like, again, I feel so stupid, and I don't feel stupid, but I just feel like, man, it was so obvious why, like I should have seen it earlier, but
I use it in my marriage. Wait for the question has like saved my marriage. I'm telling you. Just because I'm a fixer, and a lot of times with my husband, and you can even see this in personal relationships and business relationships and coachee and coach relationships and mom and parenting relationships. Sometimes people are just wanting to talk. They're just wanting to share. They're just wanting to kind of, want to be heard or want to hear themselves. Like they don't want solutions. They don't want answers. They don't want to hear from you.
Right.
They just want that reflection. And so that's something that, and I'll even have to, because it's so hard for me to not say anything just because that's who I am.
Right.
That, if my husband's sharing or, a student is sharing and there's not a question, I'll just say like,
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
And just because it gives some kind of response,
Right.
but it's really been remarkable, and even that, sometimes if there is a question and before I've even paused and like, there's another acronym that I love to use. It stands for WAIT, WAIT, and it stands for why am I talking?
Yeah.
WAIT. And so a lot of times even if there is a question, I'll give a response or a reaction without giving myself the moment to even ask myself, like, why do I even need to respond? Like, that's one of the questions that I ask in the book, in the chapter that's all about this. I'm like, why are you responding? How important is it to respond? Do you even need to respond to this right now? And really getting clear on like, if you feel this urge to like have to jump in and respond or react or fix, like, why?
Yeah. And I love this whole conversation because, obviously being in the personal development space, I'm always a work in progress, but I can tell you right now, a lot of like, even scraping the surface with some of these concepts, to me, it's literally getting to the root of behaviors, subconscious behaviors, or issues that you have that you don't recognize that you have. And I think people use so much like willpower or force or hustle to try to overcome these things, but eventually it catches up to you where you can just get to the root of all of this. And for me, I've used a lot of this to unlock purpose, or when I recognize what I'm doing isn't in my purpose, to be able to just shift out of it very quickly, which has always led to quantum leap years and things like that. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about purpose, like, because that's one of the biggest things that get asked all the time, or with me dealing with messaging, people are like, well, I don't know what my purpose is, or if I'm in alignment with my message. I'm very curious as to what you recognize after working with so many people, as far as why people aren't moving into purpose or even identifying what their purpose is. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I feel like your purpose is your why. Yeah. It's why you want to get up and do the work that you feel called to do. And your purpose has to be greater than all the excuses that you're going to have to not get up to do what it is that you want to do. So it's got to be pretty impactful. I think people can also get purpose and passion confused. To me, your passion is more the what, your purpose is the why. So if I say my purpose is freedom and being able to unlock that and empower other people to have freedom in their lives, that's my purpose. Now, the ways in which I do that is speaking and books and courses and coaching and podcasting. But those things aren't my purpose. They're more of the passions that kind of initiate the purpose. That's how I've always seen it. I think that so some people get confused because they don't even know what their purpose is or the difference between those things, or they think that every passion is a purpose, which just leaves them overwhelmed. But I think a lot of times what happens is that people get so focused on the question of where is this thing that I want, and why is it not here, and why isn't it coming fast enough, and why can't I get it, that their energy actually doesn't allow them to perceive the cues. Yeah. The awareness of now and like that lack, or like what's missing from now, is actually preventing your now from changing. And
can you give me an example? Like what would be an example of someone missing the cue? Like what would a cue be?
Yeah. So a great example is like, we'll ask a question and then we'll immediately have an answer for it. And it's kind of like, well, if you have a question, then clearly you don't have the answer.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of, this idea of taking the attention off of the now is not more and allowing for more of the embodiment of the feeling that you want. And this is getting kind of, energetic here, but it's really, I think, becoming more easy about things and less control. Right. And knowing that you can relax and the answer will come. So with your purpose, like for an example, a question that I recently had is like, what is the best utilization of this employee's talent? I'm trying to figure out that. Well, when I'm not living out my purpose or when I don't trust the answer to come, I immediately start jumping in to give the answer to the question that I have.
Right.
So, but I think really when we're able to embody the purpose and come from a trustful place with that, you don't have to keep asking the question because your purpose knows the answer.
Right.
And why you're not receiving the answer is because you're too bottled up in the question. So it's just kind of like, give it a rest. Like, you've done your due diligence. There's nothing else that you need to do except give it over. And it's really, I think, about putting some distance between asking for what you want and then allowing the answer to come to you. And the way in which I've been able to do that is rest, sleep, meditation, gratitude, listing out all the positive things that are going well, changing the subject. That's a really good one for me. Like, I'll be asking, like, if I'm racking my brain about like an employee situation, like I'll just immediately go start working on something else.
It's so smart. And I
break it.
have a very similar concept that I talk to the students about, which is like, if you have a problem or you have a question and you're trying to think your way there, it's literally impossible because you can only think from a place of what you already know. But if you knew how to get there, then it wouldn't be a question. And so I always talk about the silence, which is very similar to like, it's all the same things you're talking about. But like, the example I always give is shower thoughts. Like, why do we always have the best thoughts or ideas in the showers? It's like, because you're not thinking about anything. It just, you're letting it happen. And I had an experience in the end of 2017, beginning 2018, when I was in credit card. The reason why I went into credit card debt is because I didn't want to, and this is what kind of why I was asking the question about purpose, is I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore. And I just said, I just hate this. I'm not in alignment with it. I can feel it. And that's why I was asking about the cues, because I look back, I'm like, there were cues. There were like things telling me that this isn't right for me. This is not my purpose. And one of the major ones was that I would get resentful of our students for asking questions that they paid me to answer.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's a clear cue. Like, this is not your purpose.
Right.
And so the reason why I went in credit card debt is because I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And I still had all these bills coming in and I wasn't selling anything. And I sat in silence for like 3 months. And then I finally just like one day, boom, it hit me. But it's just so hard.
That's huge awareness.
Yeah. And luckily I've have a lot of assistance in that and like amazing mentors. But the problem is most people don't. Most people don't have that stuff. Most people aren't even aware of what steps to take. They don't know what's going on. And so it just causes a lot of friction, which is why I think your book is so perfect for so many people. And so one of the last questions I have for you is just, how does someone know they're the right reader for your book? Like, what would they be experiencing that tells them the book is right for them?
Yeah. If they're sick and tired of their own BS, that's a first indication. If they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, maybe they've identified with some of the things that we've talked about today, like their need to control, their need to fix, their need to always have an answer to everything, which is just, there's no trust in that. Someone who wants really applicable, simple steps. At the end of every chapter, I have what's called Your Turn, where I love questions. I love to ask questions and just allow yourself to kind of feel through it. You don't have to have an answer immediately, but just allow yourself to feel through these answers and to start to think differently and unlock some new embodiment around things. So it's for someone who maybe they're kind of at that proverbial kitchen table like I was, and maybe they've checked off a lot of boxes and on paper they're successful, whatever that is, but they feel like they can't get what they want because they don't know what they want, or they feel like they need to be farther along. And this is really about identifying what you want and then letting that be enough, but then backing it up with, a lot of the worthiness that we need to be able to take it to the next level, and that inner wisdom and inner guidance that we have, and really coming from that place of trusting that. And then I talk a lot about pitching and negotiating and how to be your own publicist and how to advocate for your own self and speak up. And, one of my favorite quotes in the book is, you can't hide yourself and expect to be seen. And that's a big thing that happens in my community. There's all this resentment that starts to build up from this expectation of, I should be more seen, I should be farther along, I should have this and that and this and that. But it's like, but what are you really hiding behind, consciously or subconsciously, that's keeping you from really being seen? And so it's been a really amazing cathartic experience for me to go through. I unlocked a lot of things through writing it, and I'm really excited for those who feel connected to that to pick it up. It's also on Audible, so if you want to listen to it, you can as well, or to get the hard copy if you want to, write in it.
Yeah. And I love that you cover a lot of that stuff, like the negotiating and the PR and all that stuff. Cause I know we talked about that on the last episode, and some of the things you've done in the past while building your business, like blew my mind, like how you would organize different brands for different things. And I remember you told a story about how you furnished an entire apartment, and I was just like, this is effing genius. And that is clearly like one of your like highest zones of genius, at least from my perspective. Everything that I'm like totally respect about you is just like your ability to be able to do that and have like build up a brand and all of that stuff. So where can people go to like buy the book, follow you, all that good stuff?
Yes, thank you. So you can, my website's juliesolomon.net. You can go to juliesolomon.net/getwhatyouwant to order the book or order the Audible. We have all the different retailers there, wherever you like to order books. And if you go there and then screenshot us or put in on a form your order number, we will give you a free VIP ticket to a virtual workshop I'm doing later this summer that dives deep into a lot of the principles of the book. It's the Get What You Want workshop. So you can get it there. Even if you get it from wherever, just go to that website and put your order number in so you can get a free ticket to that workshop. And then the Influencer Podcast, I'm there every Wednesday, wherever you love to listen to podcasts. And then on social media, I tend to spend the most time on Instagram. And you can find me there at Jules, Juls, Solomon, Solomon.
Amazing. And everyone, please go get the book, go check it out, go follow Julie. As you guys know, I don't promote really anything on this podcast. And the only times I ever tell you to go buy something from the podcast, it's either going to be my own stuff or from people that I absolutely trust. And it's a very, very rare thing. Look, I'm not an affiliate for Julie at all. She just told me about the book. I know her, I trust her, and I know her ability to be able to help you guys. And so go check it out. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. And Julie, again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. All right, guys, if you haven't done so already, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review. I would be so grateful for that. That's basically how we get more exposure. And also it's a great way for me to be able to know how we're doing here on the podcast. So go do that. And I'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested. And thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.